So, Sonic Adventure's been a bit of a hot topic recently, what between Takashi Iizuka, director of the game, saying he'd be up for remaking it one of these days, causing the internet to explode in a wildfire of clickbait articles, or more people jumping on the bandwagon of assuming it's terrible because of...
This is unacceptable!
Some types of YouTube videos. I feel like I've wanted to talk about it for a while, but I've been unsure what approach I wanted to take. I knew I couldn't simply do a recommendation video because, well, my feelings are a bit more complicated than a video like that would allow. I couldn't do an analysis video or an essay because, well, to be honest, I just have too many thesis statements to make. No, instead I wanted to take a critical look at this game, which just turned 20 years old last month, by the way. Yeah, feeling old yet? This video is not going to be anywhere close to objective or without nostalgia. Sonic Adventure is simply too ingrained to me, means too much. This is just a look back, a diatribe to explain what I think about this game, what it means to me personally, and why I think not enough people really give it a chance. So, buckle up your lightspeed shoes and open your heart, it's time to take a look back at Sonic Adventure. Let's start with a bit of a history lesson, dialing back to the year 1994. Sonic & Knuckles has just been completed, and the majority of the Japanese side of the Sega Technical Institute, including producer and programmer Yuji Naka, decided to return to Japan. They left Sonic in the capable hands of other creative teams in other countries, and the Japanese Sonic team decided they would prove their merit as a team that could do things beyond just Sonic games by making a brand new intellectual property. The result was a game conceived from an idea thought up by Naka back in the days right after the completion of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, Nights into Dreams, which would release on the Sega Saturn in 1996. Sega was of course unwilling to allow Sonic to die off though, as the franchise was still an incredibly viable tool for raking in money. In the 90s, Sonic was on top of the world. The games were selling like nobody's business, he was appearing in pasta commercials, ice cream commercials, he had his own cartoons, his own animated film in Japan. The Blue Blur had it all, and eyes were on him to make the jump into the realm of 3D, especially with the release of Super Mario 64 from Nintendo. The company assigned the remaining members of STI to the next major installment of the series, Sonic X-Treme, though many people on the team had grand visions of what a third-dimensional Sonic game would look like. The project wouldn't get very far. Naka himself took one look at the first conceptual ideas for the game and reportedly shook his head and said, "Good luck." Through a cavalcade of creative differences, hardware and director shifts, and an overwhelming amount of development hell, the game was cancelled, leaving a Sonic-less void in the lineup of the Sega Saturn console. While other titles like Sonic 3D Blast and the 32X exclusive Knuckles Chaotix attempted to fill the hole that was left behind, the writing was on the wall. These titles were not the heavy hitters the company was looking for.
Our technology comes from the arcade world. You can't take arcade games, advanced computer graphics in the arcade world, and run them on the most advanced PC today, but you can run them on Saturn.
Well, look, Sega, if all this is true, then why aren't you on top?
In the meantime, Iizuka, who'd been the senior game designer for Sonic 3, began pushing the idea of a Sonic RPG to be the next big title. Sonic Team of Japan was facing the inevitability that Sega was relying on them to set the record straight and bring the franchise back to the limelight, and so it was decided that they would take the helm. Not wanting to make a strictly RPG-based game, but knowing the 3D-capable systems had better space and graphical capabilities with which to expand on story, it was decided that the new game would have a bigger emphasis on plot than previous titles. Before any work could be done, though, the team had to hash out how Sonic would move in a 3D space. A consensus was reached after much debate, and a test level was put together to see if what they had on paper would transfer to the screen the same way. Iizuka was quoted talking about the test level, saying the following: "When we built our first test level, we knew we had to test it out, just to make sure our ideas worked. It ended up only lasting about 10 seconds, and we knew we couldn't build a game around this structure. We had to rebuild levels over and over again until we finally had a level length we were happy with." The first builds of the game were originally programmed with the Sega Saturn hardware in mind, but as early development trudged on, it became painfully obvious that the Sega Saturn was not going to live nearly as long as the Sega Genesis did. The team had two options: either continue working on Sonic Adventure and make it a Sega Saturn title, or scrap what they had done so far and start from scratch using the proposed specs of Sega's next system, the Dreamcast, as a reference point for development. Realizing how pointless the Saturn option seemed to be at this point, the team decided the scope of the project was better suited to more advanced hardware, and pushed onward to create a Sega Dreamcast launch title. Now this was not only the next major Sonic game, but a game that had to perfectly demonstrate the power of the Dreamcast itself. This meant that Sonic Adventure had to be an ambitious title if nothing else, and I think that's a word you should remember while we discuss Sonic Adventure during this video. Ambitious. People talk about this game, I feel, like it's devoid of heart, that the programmers were just lazy and didn't care, that the game is glitchy and buggy and awful and dated, and nobody with a creative bone in their body could earnestly make something like this. Yeah, just hold on a second. With production in full swing for the Dreamcast, the team was pumped to use the hardware to its full advantage. They desired to create worlds far more realistic than they'd created before in the series, and the core development team of the game all went on a trip to Central and South America for research purposes. Sonic games before this point had featured plenty of ruins and jungles, but none of the team's members had actually gone to any such places, only lifting inspiration from movies, television shows, and other popular media of the time. With this in mind, the team decided to explore individually, hoping the scenery would give them all inspiration for the upcoming game. They were faced with sights and sounds wholly foreign to them, determined not to let the trip become a simple pleasure cruise in the meantime. They filmed their trip and took pictures of everything they could manage to snap a shot of. Many of their personal trip images were used in the game, not just as inspiration for the various locations, but sometimes textures in the game's more realistic areas were lifted directly from the team's collected photographs. The trip, while enlightening, was also rather difficult at times. The team had encounters with tarantulas, snakes, and Kitano collapsed at one point from altitude sickness. Ultimately, of course, the team returned to Japan in one piece, ready to tackle the journey ahead. The principal cast was redesigned as well to emphasize to the market that this wasn't just a new Sonic game, but a new kind of game, period. Though unique goals and playstyles were all conceived by the team for the character roster, Iizuka felt there should be playstyles in the game that were more separate from the story, to break the pace of the high-speed action, as well as draw in players that wouldn't typically purchase a Sonic game. This led to the creation of E-102 Gamma, a robot built by Dr. Eggman whose gameplay would revolve around targeting and shooting, and Big the Cat, whose gameplay revolved around relaxed fishing, which the player could take at their own pace. Iizuka also wanted to introduce a new villain into the game that was completely separate from Dr. Eggman, who could also be something impossible to create on previous hardware. Due to Iizuka's desire to make an enemy that was liquid and transparent, Chaos was conceived, and Naka approved of him on the spot. His shapeshifting and strange force-of-nature-like presence was something the team desired to make a focal point of the game, going so far as to place him in the very first playable section of the game's story. Another aspect the team decided to implement was introducing an A-Life concept, similar to the one used in Knights. It was retooled and fleshed out for the new game with the creation of the Chow, creatures within the game who could be raised and were meant to attract new players who would find incentive in getting better at the main game to spend more time with the Chow raising. With each piece clicking together, word got out that the next Sonic game was on the way, and speculation was abound. The hype went into overdrive when it was announced on August 22, 1998, a public unveiling of the game would take place at the Tokyo International Forum. The anticipation for this event was massive, and people lined the streets hours ahead of time for a chance to sneak a peek at the new Sonic title. When the doors finally opened, the crowd learned a wealth of information, and the event was also simultaneously streamed to the internet and recorded on VHS for those who couldn't make it. 1998, guys. Live gameplay and pre-recorded videos showcased the style of the game, along with new characters and bits and pieces relating to the new story. The game instantly became one of the most requested in company history, and on December 23, 1998, Sonic Adventure was finally released on the Sega Dreamcast in Japan, arriving in North America on September 9, 1999. The game's team was comprised of 60 members and took around 10 months to develop in full. Man, I kind of want to play the game now. Sorry, just give me a bit. Let me just boot this up on Steam and... Oh god. Oh no, this is not the game how I remember. Just so you know, I'm a huge baby and I don't like the new models in the DX port of the game, or the fact that certain textures are replaced, and basically I can't handle something this inconsequential or new, so I had no choice but to play the game as was originally released. Come on, pain in the ass. There we go. Now let's just... Oh, it wants the date. Well, let's just give it a little bit of hope, shall we? There we go. That's what I was looking for. Hell yeah. Sorry, where was I? Oh, right, the game. Well, actually, do you mind if I dial back for just a second? I said this video would be unusual, and I was being honest, because, you see, I have a really personal history with this game. Not just because I love Sonic the Hedgehog and make no big secret of that, but because this was the first 3D game I ever played and completed. Let's flash back a little. I was born in 1996, and though I wasn't talking Blue Hedgehog from minute one, it'd be difficult to argue that Sonic was not basically my entire childhood. I played Sonic 3 and Sonic R on Windows as soon as I could operate a computer. I watched reruns of Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog on Toon Disney. The first game system I personally owned was a Game Gear that my parents bought for me, which came with the handheld version of Sonic 2. And I also owned Sonic Chaos, Sonic Spinball, and Sonic Labyrinth. And when my older brother got a copy of Sonic Adventure in '99, I was clamoring to play it. Unfortunately, at the time, such did not come to pass. But after a little while had passed, and he'd grown tired of the Dreamcast and moved on to other things, he passed the system, and thereby Sonic Adventure, down to little old me. This would have to have been sometime in, say, 2000, 2001-ish, but I can't say with absolute certainty when. Let's just say it was somewhere in there. It was unlike anything I had ever experienced before. The multiple playstyles, the large environments, the spanning plot, it was all brand new to me. It was a formative experience. I hate to say something so cheesy, but Sonic Adventure was an experience that shaped my early days of video game playing in a very meaningful and large way. And, of course, I'd be remiss not to credit my brother in some part with that. In fact, there's something I've been meaning to ask him about this for a while. Let me just...
I know this is a little sudden, but I wanted to ask you, when you first turned on the Dreamcast, just how sexy was Sonic the Hedgehog, you think?
What?
Dropped the call after that and couldn't manage to get him back for some reason, go figure. Okay, no, but seriously, Sonic Adventure was crazy to little me. Everything I'd seen before that completely flew out of the water. My expectations were trumped in every way imaginable, and I loved every second of it. The high speed of Sonic, the fun races with Tails, the thrill of the hunt with Knuckles, the scary but exciting escape gameplay of Amy, the fast-paced shooting of Gamma, and the... We'll get to that later, actually. All of it was such a unique spectacle to me, and because of that, I'm sure you realize it's difficult for me to be completely objective when it comes to talking about this game, but I'll at least try to go into everything as fairly as I can. Sonic is the bulk of this gameplay experience, obviously, having the most levels in the game as well as the longest story campaign of the 6 playable characters. Sonic stages revolve around high-speed spectacle and platforming, running through loops, attacking baddies, reaching the end of a stage, the works. The design here is actually the closest I think the series has ever gotten to classic Sonic level design in a 3D space, with an obvious sense of direction, but design that isn't entirely tunnel-like either. You always have a pretty general idea of what direction to head, but your options in getting there are wide and varied. Spaces don't feel claustrophobic and have a nice sense of scope to them. And multiple pathways reward you for going off the beaten path with goodies like power-ups, ring boxes, or extra lives, unlike some other games. I also think this game has the best control of any 3D game to date in terms of controlling Sonic himself. He's got a real sense of weight to him, but his jumps are a tiny bit floatier than in Adventure 2. He's got the right sense of presence to him, but his movements are very flexible and allow you to be pretty loose and irreverent. He can reach pretty blistering speeds when unimpeded, and building up speed with mastery of the physics and controls is satisfying as all hell to do. Everything is based in feasible momentum that feels right, none of the boost button stuff, just steady progression, inclines, rolls, slopes, and etc. Sure, this game introduces the homing attack, but, I mean, as a main method of attack as opposed to simply jumping on enemies like in the classics, for a 3D space, where jumping on a small enemy would be far more precise a task, I think this is a necessary design change, as well as one I think works exactly as intended.
No, it's pulling you towards it.
Whoops. Oh, no.
God.
Okay. Well, there we go. Oh, Jesus. I'm up here now.
Did you know that if you don't hold forward while running through a loop, you're obviously supposed to hold forward in? You'll stop and the game will get confused? Wow, what a load of malarkey. This game is badly programmed because I'm trying my hardest to make it look worse than it is. What the heck? What the gosh hecking dang? Sonic's movement in this game is so responsive and tight. He turns on a dime, and I never feel like I'm not in complete control of him, even when things get pretty hectic speed-wise. When I see people on the internet like, oh, if they remade Sonic Adventure with the modern physics engine, it'd be awesome, I weep for those people. You see this? This is an existential nightmare. This does not meld design philosophy-wise at all. You want Drift Sonic who has a turn cycle the width of a sports car? Play Unleashed or Generations. That's not gonna work for Adventure's level design. It just won't. Oh god, that's even worse. Stop. Okay, well now I'm just getting ahead of myself. Tails' gameplay in this game is pretty snazzy too. His campaign's pretty darn short, with it only taking around a little under an hour to complete while skipping some repeat cutscenes here and there, but it serves its purpose well. Tails in the classic games was kinda like the easy mode to Sonic's normal. He could do pretty much everything Sonic could, but he also had the advantage of the absolutely level-breaking flying ability, even if it did wear him down after a bit of time in the air. Tails was the character you grabbed onto when you weren't sure you were ready for Sonic yet, and it's only fitting that his 3D gameplay sees him take shorter routes of a handful of Sonic stages in situations where he's racing against Sonic himself, or once against Eggman in his final stage. This ties somewhat thematically into the focus of his story too, which basically sees a lot of repeat events from Sonic's, but takes a larger focus on Tails' desire to come into his own and stop relying on Sonic for everything. In the end, he takes on Eggman in a city fight that Sonic isn't even present for, and he manages to save the city from Eggman's last-ditch missile attack, becoming a hero in his own right in the process. Oh, it's come a long way. His actual gameplay consists of about the same platforming finesse you'd expect from Sonic stages, albeit cut down and fashioned more after a race focus than a progression focus. You're encouraged to skip portions of the map with Tails' flying ability and go through rings in the air to push further ahead than your opponent. The only problem I really have with these stages is that sometimes due to the camera angles and Tails' speed mid-air, it can be a little disorienting trying to get your bearings when you start going really fast in the air, like... Oh God, where am I?
Man, stay off the light speed!
My bad.
Overall, not too shabby. A little rough around the edges, but certainly a pretty good transfer to 3D. Knuckles is the next on our list, sporting a pretty different style of gameplay than he had in the previous entry. In Sonic 3 and Knuckles, Knuckles was similar to Tails in the way that he could do everything Sonic could do, but had his own traits that set him apart. In his case, he was a bit heavier feeling than the other two, but could glide and also attach to flat walls, climbing up or down them at his leisure. He could also access pathways that were not accessible to either Sonic or Tails, hidden behind rocks or various other blockades they were not brawny enough to muscle through, meaning that he had even more options in terms of getting to the goal, in exchange for what felt like a little bit higher difficulty at times. In Sonic Adventure, Knuckles' stages are more like enclosed spaces, parts of level maps that, while they can be pretty large, are boxed off to specific explorable ranges. Knuckles is searching for the broken pieces of the Master Emerald, which were shattered when the Beast Chaos was released from within it by Dr. Eggman. In his stages, you'll be equipped with a radar of sorts that shows icons of emerald pieces that will beep faster and get closer to a shade of red the closer you get to one of the shards. Find 3 shards in each stage and the level is completed. Some of the shards can be rather easy to locate, hiding in plain sight or in enemies, or more rarely they can be underneath ground and will require you to dig for them. The radar thankfully indicates if you're close to more than one piece at a time, not refusing to let you know if you're right next to one simply for the sake of only focusing on one shard at a time, thereby artificially prolonging gameplay. Like some other games. Knuckles is rather dynamic, though not quite as agile as Sonic. He can do everything he did in Sonic 3 and K, running decently fast, climbing walls, gliding. It's all here and accounted for, and it feels good to traverse landscapes as the Red Echidna. Digging is a bit awkward, though, as you have to press the jump and action button at the same time, and although I didn't have to do much of it anyway, I'd often find myself finicking with the controls for a bit just to get it to work here and there, though it wasn't that big an issue. Knuckles also has some punch attacks, but to be honest, I always found gliding into enemies to be the more reliable option. They're not bad, but they're a bit short range for my liking. Overall, I think Knuckles has a pretty nice gameplay style that's implemented well into this game. I wish he had a little more to do, like in the classic games, but this is a fine first attempt at translating Knuckles' unique strengths into a separate style completely. It gets a thumbs up from me. It works, and it's decently fun, and that's all I can really ask for. Amy Rose makes her playable debut in this game in levels where she... Wait, this isn't her playable debut? Oh, sorry, I didn't remember Sonic R. I mean, can you really blame me? You didn't mean Sonic R? Well, what other game could she possibly have made her playable debut in? What? Oh my god? No. You know what? This video's long enough as is. Let's get back on topic. Good lord! Sonic's punching her. God, it's awful. She might as well have made her playable debut, because this Amy looks way different than her previous incarnation, and she's been aged up from 8 to 12 as well. In Amy's gameplay, you're trying to evade this creepy robot named Zero, who looks like he just decided to skip a seminar about keeping your hands to yourself. All the while, you'll solve basic puzzles and traverse platforming obstacles to find a balloon that you grab on to escape him. Amy's scenario is the shortest in the game, with a decent handful of cutscenes but only 3 actual proper stages: Twinkle Park, Hot Shelter, and Final Egg, as well as one boss fight with Zero himself at the very end. Amy's character arc of sorts is all about becoming more independent, similarly to Tails. Amy wants to prove that she can make it on her own without relying solely on Sonic for help, and by the end she's actually able to reunite a bird with its family after taking down her pursuer all by herself. It's a pretty feel-good outcome, all things considered. It's schmaltzy, sure, but it's sweet. Amy's actual gameplay is nothing to write home about, really. It's inoffensive, it doesn't really have any gaping design flaws of any kind, aside from maybe that her ground speed's pretty abysmal, but Amy isn't really focused on speedy gameplay anyway, so I can forgive that. Her levels feel like they're supposed to have more of an emphasis on stealth with the escaping and evading Zero thing, but it more often than not devolves into a simple wild goose chase where you solve puzzles and whack Zero in the face with the hammer if he gets too close to you at any point.
Begone, thought!
It's a little underwhelming, and frankly I think it should have been extrapolated upon more, but as it stands, it's an interesting break from the formula and a fine effort at the very least. Also, the hammer jump is just super fun to do. Next, we have newcomer E102 Gamma. Gamma is a robot created by Dr. Eggman, and while at first he's sent on missions for the Mad Doctor, an encounter with Amy leads him to reconsider why he does what he does. He's not able to compute love or friendship, but he also isn't able to reason out the cruelty his master demands of him, and in brief moments of existential crisis, he lets Amy free of her prison cell aboard the egg carrier. Afterward, he defects from Eggman's control and decides to destroy the remaining E-Series robots in a bid to free the animals powering them from the inside. It doesn't really have anything to do with the main plot of the game, but god if it isn't bittersweet and tragic as anything. I really like Gamma for this reason, and even though he literally dies here and never properly appears in any other game, I'm okay with that. It makes him memorable to me, and that's not even for anything actually related to his levels. Also, his theme music just kicks ass. Gamma's actual gameplay centers around getting to the end of a stage to fight a boss before time runs out. Gamma's timer ticks down instead of up, 1 second at a time, but you can gain time by locking onto targets and shooting them. His gameplay is very frantic and explosion-heavy, but although it doesn't last very long, it's pretty fun. It's like a precursor to the mech stages from Sonic Adventure 2, but I actually like these more than those. Maybe it's just because Gamma feels a lot less clunky, though, because for a tall, gangly hunk of metal, he doesn't actually feel too stiff or awkward to control. His hover upgrade is especially a lot of fun to use. His bosses are pretty pathetic, though, going down in mere moments with a fair bit of button mashing, and overall, though, I'd say Gamma's a welcome addition to the party. I just wish his campaign was a little bit longer, and maybe had a tiny bit more ties to the main plot, even though I do love his character arc on its own. So, what's next again? Did you know there's a thing in the Twinkle Park building where you do carts like the ones that are featured in the first section of Sonic's Twinkle Park stage? It's called Twinkle Circuit. It's nothing all that special, kind of controls like I'm slamming repeatedly into a wall because I have no steering wheel in my car, but it's a fine distraction. You see, the Chow Garden's also a feature in this game. I mentioned it before, but here it is. It's not something I use much, to be honest. I think this was one of the few things that Sonic Adventure 2 did much better, but it was first conceived of in this game, and it does its job fine enough. Actually, you can get a cool, shiny egg in the Station Square hub, too. If you take it off its platform in the shop, the door locks because you're, like, stealing. But if you take this rock from the courtyard and swap them out, you can take it. I sure do love robbery in my children's platform game. Did you know there's a statue of a guy just outside the burger shop? He's just really creepy and weird, and honestly, he doesn't really serve any purpose other than an inside joke with developers about some Colonel Sanders statue doll or whatever. Anyway, I just always picked him up and dropped him in the open sewer as a kid because I could. And did you know there was an arcade ride called Waku Waku Sonic Patrol Car, where Sonic is a policeman? Okay, fine. I'll talk about Big the Cat now. Listen, I don't hate Big. At least I don't hate him as a character. Sure, he's a big dumb oaf who's only here to chase after a frog and contribute no actual meaningful input to the plot at large, but he's harmless. He's just comedy relief. I don't care. I don't take issue with Big himself, but his gameplay. Oh, his gameplay. If a playstyle in a game could accurately convey being kicked in the crotch, I'm sure the feeling of playing big stages would come pretty damn close. You see the frog? Okay. Well, sit here like a dumbass, cast your line, and now hope for the best. Most of the time you will spend here hoping to God that this little moron bites your lure, and the other part of that time will be spent wondering, wait, why did he stop biting it all of a sudden? I swear, the fishing mechanics are janky as hell, painfully awkward at best, and angering at its worst. Izuka said something about Big being intended to break the pace and be relaxing compared to the high-speed portions? I'm not relaxed. I'm relaxed having fun as Sonic. Here, I feel like I'm trying to finish pushing out a kidney stone. I'm not into it, not having fun, but here I am, because there's no other way to progress. And his one boss encounter? Oh, God. I see what they were going for. I really do. And to be honest, if this was all just side content, I probably wouldn't even mind. But the simple fact that Big Scenario is required to beat it in order to unlock the final segment is a really big turnoff. It doesn't ruin the game for me, not by a long shot, but I dread arriving at this one every single time. It's not fun, it's dreadfully slow, and it's just not well designed. It's like if there was some new character who was all into cars, and then all their levels were the awkward Twinkle Cart minigames, except they were required to unlock the final story, and you had to get a certain time for each lap in order to complete the stage. It sucks! Hey, how about that last segment, huh? Well, to fully explain this, we'll probably have to rewind and touch on the actual plot now. I've been skipping around that for a bit now because I wanted to get most of the gameplay opinions out of the way first, because this game has a bit of a doozy of a plot, and I have a lot of thoughts about it, so let's dive right in. The game's plot kicks up when Eggman destroys the Master Emerald, causing Angel Island to fall into the ocean. The reason he does this is because he reads from some stone tablets or whatever that a calamitous being known as Chaos was stored within it. Chaos is a liquid monster who, upon absorbing the Chaos Emeralds, becomes stronger with each emerald he consumes. Sonic encounters this monster himself one night before encountering him again when confronting Eggman with Tails in the Mystic Ruins. Realizing what Eggman's plan is, Sonic and Tails race to put a stop to it before Chaos can absorb all 7 emeralds. So yeah, Chaos Emeralds are simply story items now. No special stages in sight. No mazes, no half-pipe, and no this. While Knuckles searches for pieces of the Master Emerald to restore his island to normal, Sonic and Tails go on their search for the Chaos Emeralds. Big searches for his missing frog, but I don't care because nobody cares. Gamma stuff happens alongside a lot of this, and I like it, but it doesn't matter. Sonic and Tails collect a few emeralds along the way, but just as many as they gain are also taken by brute force from Eggman, and even more are lost when Eggman tricks Knuckles into thinking Sonic is also after the Master Emerald pieces, prompting them to fight and allowing Eggman to grab up the Chaos Emeralds that Sonic drops in their scuffle. Eggman retreats with Chaos to his giant fleet ship, the Egg Carrier, and Sonic and Tails give chase in the Tornado. They do this Sky Chase minigame that you have to play twice as both Sonic and Tails, which I hate, and then eventually are shot out of the sky. Sonic heads back into the city while Tails is dropped into the Mystic Ruins and decides to take more responsibility. Meanwhile, Amy Rose encounters a small bird that houses a Chaos Emerald and a pendant around its neck. Eggman is after the bird, so he sends his robot Zero to obtain it, and it gives chase to Amy in the process. Amy finds Sonic and promptly begs him to chauffeur the bird around, but Sonic is not interested. However, in the midst of the skirmishing, Amy is kidnapped by Zero and taken to the egg carrier while Sonic gives chase. Eventually, Sonic and Tails rendezvous at Red Mountain after Tails has finished his prototype plane, and they give the whole sky chase thing one more whirl before landing on the egg carrier. They go through the sky deck to get to Eggman and save Amy. Meanwhile, Amy asks Gamma to release her from the prison cell aboard the vessel, and the robot's confused when Amy insists he abandoned his creator because he's a bad man. In his confusion, Gamma allows Amy to escape, and thus starts his gradual character shift as Amy claims that she's his friend now. Sonic and Tails arrive to save Amy, but Eggman manages to grab the Chaos Emerald from the bird before then instructing Gamma to attack the lot. Sonic and Gamma briefly fight each other, and seriously, the character battles in this game are pathetic. I'm pressing one button over and over again. Before Sonic can finish the job, though, Amy stops him, asking that he not hurt Gamma because they're friends and that Gamma helped her. Sonic's confused, but concedes that Amy must have her reasons and halts the fight. Just then, the egg carrier begins to lose altitude, with Amy, Tails, and Gamma escaping the ship, while Sonic runs off to confront Eggman and Chaos. Sonic and Knuckles meet up to dish it out with Chaos, who now has 6 Chaos Emeralds, and, something about a frog? I'm sorry, I just don't care, so I can't really tell what this part's about. They defeat Chaos what seems like once and for all, and Eggman retreats. Sonic gives chase as Knuckles restores the Master Emerald back to normal, and, cat flies a plane or something? Who knows, really? Tails heads off a dud missile shot at the city by Eggman and manages to disable it before Eggman can detonate it manually, destroying his Walker robot in a battle by himself afterward. Amy sneaks back to the egg carrier and reunites her bird friend with its family while also destroying Zero in a one-on-one battle. Sonic stumbles upon some strange ruins of a time long past and a mural inside of a strange water monster that resembles Chaos, but before he can make much of it all, he heads off Eggman at his base for a final confrontation and wins. The final story picks up with Chaos turning out to not have bid it back at the egg carrier after all, quickly and viciously turning on Eggman in favor of stealing the emeralds post-haste to acquire his final form. Everyone heads to the city, but it's too late. Chaos becomes perfect chaos and brings true terror to Station Square. Eggman even tries to destroy the beast for disobeying him, but is easily disposed of by Chaos. Just as things are looking grim, Sonic is visited by a strange orb of light, who is actually the spirit of a girl from the ancient Echidna tribe of long ago, sealed into the Master Emerald along with Chaos. Tikal. I didn't mention it until now because in the actual game proper it's kind of awkwardly interspersed, but at various points in the game's story, this ball of light that often acted as a hint system during gameplay would show the various characters mysterious visions of past events. Pieced together, we start to get an idea of what Chaos is and how Tikal relates to his tragic story. Tikal is a young girl that was part of the ancient Echidna tribe, a race seemingly hell-bent on acquiring military prowess, conquering other lands and perpetuating themselves eternally. Tikal disapproves of her people's violent methods and protests their plans to seize a neighboring Holy Land from its inhabitants, to little effect as the leader of her tribe, her father, has no intention of listening to her. All the while, Tikal reluctantly visits this neighboring land and finds it belongs to a race of defenseless, childlike creatures, the Chow. The Chow are the original race, whom the Chaos Emeralds and the Master Emerald belonged to, and the Shrine's guardian is none other than Chaos himself. Though Tikal is intimidated by him at first, she comes to realize that without provocation, Chaos and the Chow are incredibly peaceful beings who merely wish to live without strife. By contrast, her warmongering, power-hungry people are desperately clamoring to get their hands on the Chaos Emeralds to expand their military reach of the army, and despite her impassioned protests to the contrary, she isn't able to stop them from seizing the Emerald Shrine. They knock her to the ground, charging the altar as they trample the small, defenseless creatures of the altar itself. This brings Chaos to feel great sorrow and rage, and he absorbs the 7 emeralds to become a monster, wiping out the Echidna tribe in the process. In a desperate bid to cease the bloodshed, Tikal approaches the altar, remembering an incantation she was taught by her grandmother, sealing herself and Chaos in the Master Emerald until the events of the game's plot kicked off and they were both released. Tikal is here to beg Sonic to find a way to seal Chaos back inside the Emerald, as she believes that without doing so, he'll rampage and destroy the world once more. Sonic refuses, however, stating that even if Chaos were to be sealed away again, his anger and sorrow wouldn't disappear. He would be literally and figuratively trapped, both in the Emerald and in his hatred and despair forever. That's really gut-punchy for a children's game. People say Sonic plots don't need to be deep, or that deep Sonic stories are cheesy and bad, but this resonates strongly with me. This provokes emotion. This is good writing. I'm not saying that just because I'm nostalgic for this game, because a lot of this flew over my head as a kid, so I can't even argue that, really. Anyway, all of Sonic's friends arrive to provide Sonic the discarded Chaos Emeralds that Chaos sapped the energy from. Apparently, because of his anger, he was only able to withdraw the negative energy from them, allowing Sonic to absorb the positive energy from the Emeralds and transform into Super Sonic. The crowd chanting in this scene for Sonic is actually even a live recording of the chanting fans at the TGS reveal of the game.
Sonic Good! Sonic Good!
アリア楽しみだけじゃない僕らがソニックを思うソニックがみんな
Sonic has his long-awaited showdown with Perfect Chaos, and although the boss is piss easy, it has some of the coolest music ever, so I can forgive it. With Chaos defeated, he's neutralized by Super Sonic's energy and returns to his original state. Realizing that the Emeralds are in safe hands and that the Chow live peacefully among humans now, Chaos is able to accept death and move peacefully into the afterlife alongside Tikal. Both of their souls finally able to find rest. Eggman flies away, and Sonic goes after to fight another day. So, with that all being said, is Sonic Adventure perfect? No, it's not, but it's not nearly as bad as everyone makes it out to be, at least in my opinion. People say it's dated and that it hasn't aged well, that it's glitchy and has bad voice acting, but plenty of games from this era hold the exact same issues. I think it's just more evident in Sonic Adventure because, well, Sonic Adventure had so much more to live up to. It wasn't as focused, it was so uniquely ambitious for its time, it was chock full of content, care, and immense amounts of creativity. This was the dying breath, the final hope of a company trying to re-emerge into the competitive console market, and it shows. It's some of their most widely diverse work in the entire franchise. It tries so many different things, but remember, this wasn't just the next Sonic game. This is the game that had to show the Dreamcast meant business. Despite its rough presentation, cutscene-wise, this story, while not perfect, is incredibly compelling and has a lot of really hard-hitting emotional beats. Its characterization is really well done, and the parts that are meant to hit hard do so pretty well, though I'd argue a lot of people give most flack to the English acting, while the original Japanese dub alleviates a lot of the issues with that. Most of the playstyles are well designed and fun, and even the worst one is at least short, even if it feels like it takes forever. I mean, when this game first came out, it got really high praise and excellent review scores. This game was a big deal back in '98. It revolutionized the 3D platformer, maybe not as much as Mario 64 did, but certainly in big and important ways. It was the first 3D platformer to even attempt an interconnected story of this magnitude, so when I see people online who clearly jump the Sonic was never good bandwagon of saying the game is terrible, I feel really bad for those people. Because sure, there's a chance they might not appreciate this game in this day and age as a new player, but there's a chance they might. And I think that's an experience anyone who's able to have it should have. Because it means a lot to so many people, including me, and oh, yeah. Sonic Adventure is a very ambitious game with a lot of cool ideas, and several of them that are pretty excellently delivered upon. It does suffer from a lack of focus and some design flaws inherent to the era, which have become more transparent when stacked against contemporary games of the modern era. It's a game that, despite its flaws, I love dearly, but a lot of other people don't. And you know what? That's okay. Because I don't just love Sonic Adventure for Sonic Adventure. I mean, I do love Sonic Adventure, but I also love it for what it represents to me personally. It was the very first experience of that kind that I had ever had, and when I was a kid, I didn't know how to point out design flaws. I didn't know how to point out bad lip syncing or fishing mechanics. I didn't even really fully grasp the complexity of some of the most emotionally vulnerable storytelling this game's plot showcases. I didn't understand, I just enjoyed myself. It was a simpler time with a simpler me. It was a time where I would wake up every day in my old house, where I'd go and spend time at the shop my mother worked at along with her father, my grandfather. It was a time where I'd call him on the phone and he'd purposefully mispronounce my second grade teacher's name to get a rise out of me. It was a time where I'd spend inordinate amounts of time petting our old dog Peanut. It was a time where I'd wear inflatable boxing gloves and smack around an Eggman punching bag with my sister, play in a Rugrats tent, or dress up as Sonic for Halloween. It was a time where our current house hadn't been built yet. It was even before another version of Sonic Adventure came out with terribly plasticky graphics that I went to the trouble of patching on Steam with a mod to actually record this footage. What I guess I'm trying to say is this. This time, the one that I'm in right now, both in this recording and after it, it's not the same one. It'll never be the same one, because I don't wake up in that house anymore. My grandfather passed away years ago, and so did my dog. My sister is married and has 2 children, and my brother doesn't really play video games much anymore, aside from football games. I'm not in kindergarten or 1st grade, or even 2nd anymore. I graduated from high school in 2015. I'm not 4 or 5 or 6 years old anymore. I'm 22. Everything is different. And sometimes we wish that it was just that easy to be nostalgic for something and feel like you're right back where you were, back when things were easier or more familiar or safer, before you did this or before you did that, before this changed or that changed, or before everything got so complicated. But even if I were to play this game the exact same way, on the exact console, exact television, the exact same house and room I was in when I first did, it wouldn't be the same. I have nostalgia for this game, and I still love this game, but I cannot replicate the exact feeling that this game evoked back then, because it is a small portion of a period of time, a disparate part of a larger whole of people I can no longer see, things I can no longer touch, and places I can no longer be. I can't recreate the same moment anymore, because that moment is gone. But I can still feel a certain way about this game now. I can still experience it in this moment, and it's not the same moment, and it's not the same time, but that's okay, because it can always mean something. Anything can always mean something. So, I implore you, don't feel ashamed to like that thing that maybe doesn't hold up so well anymore that you did when you were a kid. Because there's always something to remember. There's always a way to feel, even if it's not the same. Heck, you may even find new appreciation for parts of it that you didn't even realize were there before. We can't go back in time to change our screw-ups at the coffee shop yesterday, much less just go back and sit in a childhood blanket and watch the same cartoons and play the same video games and feel the exact same way. Because now is now. And now's not then. But it's okay that it's that way. Because all of those things can still matter. They just matter differently. So I'll keep on dreaming of finding my own way. and it doesn't matter what happens, as long as I don't give up on fighting. And while I'm doing what I can, learning what I must, and changing what I need to change, I might just remember that life's adventure doesn't ignore the past. It remembers it, and smiles while taking that first step forward to embrace the future, with an open mind and, yeah, an open heart.